Black skin was a death warrant. And so this article I found to be pretty important because of, especially with what has been going on recently with what we have seen is racial discord, racial violence, discrimination. So how the East St. Louis race massacre was an omen for racial violence to come. And what I do know is that history has a tendency of repeating itself, which is unfortunate because you have people that are dead set on trying to erase the ugly past of history, but what they're doing is they're recreating the ugly past in the present and now in the future. And so this article is by Bayeti Ross Smith, and the essay is by Susan Smith Richardson. And so this is December 18, 2021. So the racial violence in East St. Louis, Illinois on the 2nd of July, 1917 holds a special place in history. So it's not the white brutality against black people that sets the incident apart. Official counts claim that 39 black residents were killed, though estimate the range to be in the hundreds, and 7,000 were forced to flee the city. So it's not the silent march on New York City's Fifth Avenue weeks later in support of the victims, but East St. Louis is notable because it was the first of the series of race riots that happened during and after the First World War. So it was a period of peril and progress for Black Americans in the same time. So the city, which sits across the Mississippi River from St. Louis, Missouri, is a fitting place to end the Red Summer series, which began with the commemoration of the centennial of the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre, which happened in 1921. Okay, so the tensions that culminated in the violence in East St. Louis began months earlier with a strike by white workers for better wages and a union contract. So they were replaced by black workers. So before the strike, the city's growing black presence was the result of a great migration that happened from the south to the north that had turned East St. Louis, known for its political corruption and open vice, into a racial tinderbox. And so the local newspaper and East St. Louis Daily Journal fanned the flames, as they always do. So in the weeks leading to the violence, a headline reads, "Police watching many threatening Negroes." So since the strike, white mobs had been attacking black workers leaving the city meatpacking plants and slaughterhouses. On the 2nd of July, 1917, cars drove into the Negro, what they called then the Negro District, opening fire and shooting on residents. The violence further escalated when black residents shot and killed 2 police officers in an unmarked car. Early that day, white people had driven into the community firing at will, and so residents had organized to defend themselves against these attacks. And so when the car carrying the officers approached, the residents assumed it was another mob attack and shot at the car. So the 2 reporters were in another car with 2 other police officers, and one of the journalists falsely reported that the officer had identified themselves as yet were ruthlessly shot down, according to Never Been a Time. The 1917 race riot that sparked a civil rights movement by journalist Harper Barnes, but not all the area newspapers spread misinformation. Carlos Hurd, a staff reporter, St. Louis Post-Dispatch, wrote the 3rd of July, 1917, "For an hour and a half last evening, I saw a massacre of helpless Negroes at Broadway and 5th Street in downtown East St. Louis. where a black skin was the death warrant. And so just being black, you could get shot at and killed during that time. So within days of the violence, preeminent journalist Ida B. Wells Barnett arrived at East St. Louis from Chicago to investigate what happened. So the Illinois National Guard had been dispatched to restore peace and protect black residents. So Wells Barnett took aim at the portrayal of the Guard's role as she heard testimony from black women who had returned to the city to reclaim their homes or collect what was left of the property. So in her pamphlet, East St. Louis Massacre, the greatest outrage of the century, she said that the police and the state guard had turned the other way or aided the mob as blacks were attacked. And so the pamphlet prompted a congressional investigation, but the U.S. War Ministry censored the pamphlet for fear that it would inflame racial conflict as the nation was at war. But racial violence was already engulfed in the nation. So a few weeks after the massacre in East St. Louis on 23rd of August of 1917, more than 100 black soldiers stationed at Camp Logan outside of Houston marched on the city jail, fired on white residents, and fought with the police. So the soldiers were part of the Illinois National Guard, and by the time they had arrived in Texas, they were already aware of the violence in East St. Louis. So the catalyst for the mutiny was the routine harassment and assaults against black people in Houston. So this time, it involved a fellow soldier. Black military police officers attempted to get Houston police to release a black soldier who had been arrested for questioning police treatment of a local black woman. So Houston police responded by assaulting a military police officer and arresting him, though he was later released. When the word had spread at Camp Logan, the soldiers marched on the city, and the incident resulted in the largest court-martial in U.S. history. So the violence in East St. Louis and Houston highlighted a dilemma in the U.S. government grappled with throughout the First World War was racial violence that had erupted, and the black press sought to speak truth to the power about racism in America. So less than a year later, the War Department convened 41 black leaders in the Washington, D.C., most of them newspaper editors, to encourage them to support the war effort by tamping down stories about racial violence, according to the historian Patrick Washburn. Behind the scenes, efforts were underway to investigate and censor the black press, just as the government had censored Wells Barnett pamphlet about East St. Louis. And so Red Summers is a 360 video project about the artist, filmmaker Bayetty Ross Smith on the untold American history of racial terrorism in 1917 to 1921. The project is funded by Black Public Media, I-Beam, Sundance Institute, and so Open Society Foundation. So basically this article is just a little smidgen of what had happened, and this is a still photo of that event that occurred.